How do you think we can detect what database management system is used on a particular website or system that we want to find an SQL injection vulnerability? This section will go over detecting the database management system, which is the database software that is used on this web server. And we're going to go through methods of understanding what sort of database is run on the backend. Generally, we have to find the technology behind that website to figure out what sort of database is more likely to be associated with it, because technologies are usually coupled together. For example, PHP is much more likely to use MySQL as the database server, or even MariaDB, which is the same as MySQL. And an ASP website is much more likely to use the Microsoft SQL server. That will give us a good hint to find things, but that's not a sure thing. So that's the first step. So we can't be sure that based on the technology that powers the application, what the database is, but we can have a good estimate of what the technology is going to be, so we can test for the evidence of what it might be. The evidence usually comes from error messages, or we can even ask the database to identify itself if we find a vulnerability. Or we use the inference database fingerprinting methods, which just check for particular commands that only exist in a particular database. These are the three methods that we use to find DBMSs on a system. There are also automated ways of doing it. For example, SQL Map can do that. It has features for detecting what the backend DBMS is. But let's get to the error messages. We want to know how we can use the error messages to figure out what sort of database is there. That means we always have to pay attention to errors. If a website gives you errors, it's a good thing. It's telling you a lot about itself. For example, if there's this error which says ORA-01789 query block has incorrect number of result columns, it's a huge hint. It's basically telling you, if you Google it in Google, if you search it in Google, it tells you that the database is an Oracle database, because ORA stands for errors of the Oracle database. So an error usually tells you what sort of database you're using, because each database has its own error strings and different things. The 5-digit number is the specific version and type of this error. And this error shows us that the database is Oracle. So search the error message in Google and you'll see the result. For example, if you see this error that says you have an error in your SQL syntax, check the manual that corresponds to your MySQL server version for the right syntax. Well, clearly this is a MySQL error and tells you that the server is using a MySQL database. Also keep in mind that a server does not necessarily use one database server. So how do we ask the database management server to identify itself to us? First, for that, we need to find an injection, because we need an injection to run arbitrary queries on the database so that it can identify itself to us. So a simple injection would let us find it. These are the different queries that you need to run in different databases to find whether the database is something specific or not. In Oracle, you can run select banner from v version. In MySQL, it's select version and has a double add at it. But the method for fingerprinting the database is dependent on the functionality that each database supports. So not all databases support all functions. Each database has its own commercial functions and features that it adds on top of this SQL standard. And this method is focused on using these functions and these functionalities to figure out what sort of database exists in the server. So the basic idea is to submit SQL segments which are only valid for one specific database, and if the injected segment is working, then we can conclude that it's the database server that we are testing for. And if it fails, then we can try the other segments that are for other database servers. This is the method that SQL map uses, and it's a little hard to know all of these segments that are valid in different versions and different databases, but you can easily Google for them and find them. For example, if we can only have a number input, the method for detecting is in MySQL is using the pow function, which is for computing the power. It only exists in MySQL, and it shows that the database is a MySQL database. If this runs correctly, then we run MySQL, and this is the reference for that. You can see the parameters and other features of this particular function here, or in the MySQL documentation. For Oracle, the numeric function that's unique to it is bit and it only exists on Oracle. So if it succeeds, then the backend database is an Oracle database. So bit and is the particular function for Oracle. For the Microsoft SQL Server, the function square is unique and it doesn't exist in other databases. And these are the references for these three functions, but you can also check the official documents and Google for these functions as well, or even Google for cheat sheets that show you these particular functions for each database for more databases than we were covering here. For the text input, we can use the following functions to figure out whether a database is something specific or not, which is much more used than the numeric thing because text is much more common to be used. In Oracle, the concatenation operator is pipe, which is unique to Oracle. If this particular statement works, then it definitely is an Oracle database. The Oracle concatenation is different from MySQL, which allows you to concatenate two strings by basically putting them together. And in Microsoft SQL Server, you should use the plus operand to concatenate. To do all of this automatically without like manually checking for these functions, you can use tools. There are many tools for doing this, but as per previous training, we're going to use SQL Map to detect this because it is a very robust tool and it's very versatile. It has a lot of features. It supports a lot of database management systems. I believe about 20 different databases. So the fingerprinting by SQL Map is one of the core features. It can test for all different types of databases, and once it finds a candidate, it asks you whether you want to continue testing others or not. So as you can see in this photo, the SQL Map is running on the vulnerable sample that we just saw. There's a green statement at the bottom here that says the backend database is MySQL. So this is saying it for sure. It's a green thing. It's saying the backend database is MySQL. There's no question. If it can't tell it for sure, then it's going to suggest that it's more likely to be MySQL. Do you want to go with MySQL or do you want to change to something else or test for more stuff? So this is the automated detection of SQL Map. On top of the automated detection of the backend DBMS, you can also define the DBMS in SQL Map. So if you know a particular web application or system is using a particular DBMS, you can just specify that information to SQL Map so it doesn't test for it anymore.